The rain had been falling for most of the morning, soft and steady, leaving the narrow roadside slick with mud and the air filled with the low hush of water against leaves. He had no real reason to stop walking. His boots pressed through shallow puddles, his coat already darkened with the weight of water. But as he passed the edge of a drainage ditch, something unfamiliar reached his ear. Not loud, but broken, like breath caught in a fold of silence. He paused, listening again. Then crouched slowly, eyes tracing the rusted grate, and caught a glimpse of a small form half hidden beneath the curve of the concrete edge. A puppy. Motionless, curled tightly against the chill. Its fur was soaked through, clinging in patches to the sharp curve of ribs, and its eyes were shut so firmly it looked more like sleep than suffering. The rain had pooled around it, trickling down from the road above, collecting in a shallow basin where its tiny body lay half submerged. It didn't flinch, it didn't lift its head. He moved closer, hands steady, breath slow, and reached in without speaking. His fingers met soaked fur that offered no resistance. The pup was warm, but only barely, the kind of warmth that could tip either way. The man didn't try to lift him all at once. He simply pulled the jacket from his own shoulders and laid it down over the animal, letting the fabric hold the shape of care without pressure. The water continued to fall, forming soft rings around his boots. Time passed. Minutes, maybe more. There was no one else on the road, and no sound beyond the rain and the faint tremor of the pup's shallow breath. The man settled down into the dirt beside the drain, letting the mud stain his trousers. The jacket was thick, wool-lined, worn with age. It would hold warmth longer than skin. Beneath the fabric, the puppy made a faint motion. Not enough to call it movement, but a twitch along the spine, barely felt. The man shifted slightly, repositioning the folds so they pressed closer to the pup's side. A soft sound escaped the bundle. Not a whine, not a cry, just the fragile catch of breath struggling through cold. The man leaned forward close enough to feel the rise and fall and whispered, "It's okay, I've got you." The words dissolved quickly in the damp air. The puddle around them had begun to recede, pulled gently downhill by the slope of the road. A trail of muddy water moved past his boot and away toward the brush. The puppy remained still, but its ribs moved with more rhythm now, the kind of breath that pushed slightly upward before falling back. One paw, once folded beneath its chest, now rested atop the jacket's edge, the toes curled slightly inward. He stayed there, unmoving, not for any reason but because it felt like stillness was all that mattered. He knew nothing about the animal, where it had come from, how long it had been there, or whether it had been born wild or abandoned. But in that moment, the cold and the mud and the quiet closeness were enough. They shared the same space, the same air, the same need for time. The puppy didn't lift its head. It didn't cry out, but when the man touched the edge of its fur once more, the warmth had grown. Slow, tentative, but present. The faintest shift of life clung to it, like the soft weight of rain against the earth. Around them, the sky held no sign of clearing, but the light had changed. Slightly, just enough to notice. The fabric soaked quickly, but he didn't move. His jacket clung to the animal's fragile body, already heavy with rain, but it held some warmth still, the kind that lingered from skin and stayed in seams. The puppy hadn't stirred again since the faint twitch of its paw. Its breath was shallow and uneven, chest rising like something learning how to keep rhythm. The man lowered his hand near its side but didn't touch. Just the presence of something calm nearby, something warm, seemed enough. Water pooled beneath him, seeping into the knees of his trousers and darkening the soil. His hands rested loosely on his lap. He watched the pup's ribs rise and fall, counting each breath with his eyes. The road remained empty, and the sky above hung with low gray weight, offering no break, only the soundless insistence of falling rain. Time passed without mark, no cars, no footsteps, no voices. He shifted once, carefully, adjusting the folds of the jacket to better cradle the puppy's spine, then settled again. His own shoulders trembled once from the cold, but he didn't wrap his arms tighter. The jacket had only one purpose now. The mud beneath him held the smell of wet stone and earth, and the nearby ditch trickled quietly with runoff. There was no shelter, no plan, just the act of staying. The puppy's head was turned inward toward its own chest, ears pressed back, nose nearly touching its front paw. Its body was so still that, without the rise of its breathing, it would have seemed lifeless. But beneath the wool, its warmth was growing, slowly, pressed close by the fabric and the body beside it. The faint tremble of shivering began to return. Not violent, but enough to show the body had not surrendered. The man leaned slightly closer, eyes soft. He didn't speak again, just watched. A few minutes later, the pup's hind leg stretched slightly, no more than an inch, then drew back in. The rain deepened the silence, masking every small movement. A breeze carried the faint smell of wet leaves and distant smoke, but nothing changed around them. Even the birds had gone still. The man reached one hand slowly toward the puppy's side, placing it near the soaked wool, fingers relaxed. He didn't stroke or lift, just let his hand rest there, shared weight on the ground. The animal's breath didn't change, but its body no longer curled quite as tightly. One ear shifted faintly, the skin fluttering under a droplet of rain that had fallen through the jacket. His breath moved slower now, paced to match the small creature wrapped beneath him. The act of waiting held no frustration, no urgency, just the quiet offer of presence. His other hand rested in the dirt, palm open, gathering rain. The world felt far away. The dog's body gave no loud answer. No clear sign of turning, but its stillness felt different now, less locked, less lost. The warmth, trapped in that one layer of cloth, began to build like something borrowed and shared, a flicker held between lives. He shifted his weight slightly to keep the fabric from sliding and whispered again. The words meant more for the moment than the ears beside him. "You're not alone." The sound slipped away in the hush of rain. In front of him, the pup's nose twitched. Not much, just enough. A soft sigh left its mouth, almost inaudible, a single breath deeper than the last. Around them, the drain kept flowing, and the puddles thickened in the grass. But in that pocket of wet silence, nothing else moved. Nothing had to. The rain continued, and the man stayed. The rain had softened into a mist by then, a quieter kind of falling that didn't splash but settled gently over the street. The leaves, the folds of the jacket still wrapped around the pup's body. The man had not shifted much. His legs had gone numb from the cold, but he remained kneeling, his hand resting lightly near the bundle of wool and fur. There had been no sounds for nearly an hour, just the soft rhythm of rain and breath. The pup's chest continued its fragile rise and fall, too slow, too shallow, but present. Its body remained curled, limbs tucked tightly as though preserving the smallest thread of warmth. His own back had begun to ache, but he barely noticed. The silence had taken hold of time, stretching it until each minute felt like a held breath. Then something broke the stillness, not loud, not clear, just a small, instinctive tremor. The pup's front paw shifted. First a twitch, then a slight stretch forward, curling again before settling. The man's eyes caught the movement immediately. He didn't speak, only let his hand drift a little closer. His fingers hovered just beside the tiny paw, careful not to press or touch too soon. He watched as the pup's spine gave the faintest shiver, the motion traveling through muscle and fur like a signal from within. The man leaned forward slightly, moving closer to the pup's head. Beneath the coat, he could now see the breath deepen, still weak, still labored, but growing steadier. A single drop of rain clung to the puppy's whiskers and slid down its nose. The man's hand rose gently and brushed the moisture away with his sleeve, then paused. "You're okay now," he murmured. the words nearly lost in the hush. At the sound, the puppy's ear flicked. Not fully, not with strength, but enough to show it had heard. It stayed closed, folded tight against its head, but it moved once more, then stilled. He exhaled quietly, more from release than relief, and stayed still again. The body language of the pup had changed. Its ribs moved with slightly more purpose now, and its neck had shifted, pressing lightly against the folds of the coat. The tremors were returning, not violent but regular, the kind of shivering that marked the slow return of circulation. The man kept his hand nearby, open, palm up, letting the puppy adjust to the shape of safety without pressure. A few minutes later, the puppy moved its head slightly, just enough that its nose poked forward through the collar of the coat. The man could see mud dried into the fine hairs around its eyes and mouth, bits of grass caught between its toes. It had been there a long time. The angle of its ears had changed, less folded back, now slightly lifted. The coat was soaked through, but it had done its work. The warmth between the man's chest and the bundle of cloth had built slowly, steadily, held together by the closeness of stillness. In the background, the steady drip from a nearby tree branch punctuated the quiet. The man stayed beside the animal, unmoving. There were no other people, no voices, no signs of movement beyond what had just occurred between them. But that was enough. The twitch of a paw, the flicker of an ear, the deepening of breath. Small movements, each one a thread pulled back toward life. The puppy didn't open its eyes, but its body began to loosen. One leg stretched a little farther, and its back rose gently as it inhaled. He adjusted the coat once more, wrapping it closer. Neither of them needed to go anywhere just yet. Not while the sky remained gray and soft above them. The puppy pressed its face deeper into the warmth, and the man watched as the rise of its breathing steadied like a rhythm remembered. The wind had picked up gently, threading through the wet branches above and stirring the edges of the man's jacket where it lay around the pup. A few dry leaves swept across the road, sticking briefly in puddles before drifting off again. The puppy remained still, its body no longer trembling, but not yet strong. Each breath now came with a quiet steadiness, slow but clear, and its ears had begun to rise and fall in faint rhythm. The man had not moved far from his place beside it, shifting only when the cold in his knees grew sharp. His hands, red from the wet ground and chilled air, rested again on his thighs. He didn't expect company. The street had been empty for hours. A soft rumble broke the stillness, tires on gravel, hesitant and slow. A pale car moved down the lane, tires pressing carefully through the water. It rolled to a stop a few yards ahead. For a moment, nothing. Then a door opened, and a woman stepped out with an umbrella balanced gently above her shoulder. She stood still first, eyes fixed on the shape of the man crouched in the mud, then let her steps bring her forward without haste. No questions came. She didn't speak, only moved closer, her pace light and quiet. The man glanced up. Their eyes met only briefly before she looked down at the bundle of wool and fur. She lowered the umbrella and knelt, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. Her coat brushed against the wet grass. She didn't reach forward, but she leaned close enough to see the pup's small chest rise and fall, her breath held in quiet observation. The man whispered, almost beneath the sound of the wind, "He's still breathing." She nodded once, almost to herself, then opened the folds of a thick shawl from her arm. Together they began to shift the fabric, her hands finding the edges of the coat, his arms guiding the puppy gently from the soaked cloth. The puppy stirred faintly at the movement, one paw lifting in slow protest, but the motion stopped quickly, leaving only a soft exhale in its place. It didn't resist. Its eyes stayed closed. The man lifted it with both arms, careful to keep its spine level, and the woman adjusted the shawl around its body, wrapping the damp limbs against the thin ribs. They moved together without speaking. He stood slowly, legs unsteady, and followed her to the car. The back door opened, and she stepped aside as he placed the bundle on a folded jacket in the back seat. The pup's body shifted slightly under the new warmth, the edge of the shawl brushing its cheek. A soft wheeze left its nose, no louder than breath through leaves. The man closed the door with care and stood still beside the vehicle, water dripping steadily from the brim of his cap. "Vet's still open down in Cairo," she said quietly. "Not far." He nodded. Neither asked for more. The drive was not long, but it felt suspended in quiet. The woman kept one hand near the bundle in the back, steadying it each time the car turned. The man sat beside her, hands resting between his knees, eyes following the blurred trees outside the window. The road curled past empty fields and wet hedgerows, and in the distance the town lights blinked dimly through the mist. By the time they reached the edge of town, the rain had returned. Softer now, a fine drizzle that clung to the windshield. The puppy had not moved again, but its breathing remained present, small and certain. As the car rolled to a stop beside the clinic, the woman cut the engine and rested both hands on the wheel. The man looked down at his jacket, still damp, still stained. Neither spoke. The moment held quiet, and something within it stayed. The days that followed passed in quiet intervals, marked only by the shift of weather and the way the road dried in patches, then darkened again with a passing cloud. The rain didn't last, but the cold held steady. In the early hours of the fourth morning, the man walked again along that same narrow road, boots brushing against the damp edge of the grass where the ditch had since cleared. The mud where he had once knelt was now dried and broken, a faint outline left behind, as if something had been pressed there and then lifted gently away. He didn't plan to stop. His feet carried him without urgency, the rhythm of his stride calm and familiar. But when he reached the edge of town, where the low white building stood behind a line of hedges, his eyes turned, and something shifted. In the front window of the clinic, behind the smudged glass and a row of stacked folders, a small movement caught his attention, slow and unsteady, but unmistakable. A puppy, no longer curled in a coat or buried beneath silence, now stood on thin, trembling legs. Its fur had dried and softened, pale patches visible beneath the bandage wrapped around its hind leg. The man stepped closer, the gravel giving slightly beneath his weight. He paused at the gate, watching without calling out. The pup turned once, nose twitching in the air as if searching for something familiar. Its stance was cautious, front paws steady while the back ones shuffled into balance. For a moment, its head tilted and the ears rose slightly. Its gaze found his through the glass, not fixed or certain, but present. A flicker of something passed in the way it didn't look away. Then the tail gave a single, tentative sweep through the air. He didn't smile, but he remained there, still his hands tucked into his coat sleeves. The air around him was quiet, broken only by the low rustle of wind brushing through the dry hedges behind him. The pup didn't move closer. It simply stood, eyes holding to his as if recognizing the shape of warmth, not as memory, but as something felt once and quietly kept. A young woman stepped into view behind the glass, clipboard in hand. She glanced at the pup, then at the man by the gate. She didn't wave or call out. Her expression didn't change, but she reached down, touched the pup's head gently, and stepped aside. The animal didn't follow. It stayed near the window, eyes soft, tail flicking once more in the same slow rhythm. The man gave a small nod. Not to the woman, not even quite to the pup, just to the moment. Then he turned. His steps were unhurried, his back straight, and the path before him led back the way he had come. He didn't look over his shoulder. There was no need. The pup stood there still, pressed lightly against the glass, watching. The trees above the road stirred in the wind, shedding thin leaves that danced across the shoulders of passing cars. The sound of distant birds rose in intervals, blending with the hush of moving air. And in the quiet space between them, two lives moved forward, one walking down the road, the other standing in a window, both carrying something the rain had not washed away.